Sure.
All right, well, let's pretend we are. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by my co host, Michael.
How's it going?
Good. It's going good, man. It's going well. It's going well. Looking at the stream, though, having you be on my side of the screen is a little weird.
They, they they just felt the need to make a change.
Yeah, left to right in order of importance.
I mean, depends on. I don't know.
Don't have a
I got nothing.
response.
I got nothing. Yeah.
Well, this week is an exciting week. Sorry we're late. I had to be dad. So my wife went out of town. I had to uh, do dad duties basically. So we are here on a Wednesday instead of a Monday or Tuesday like we've been normally been doing. We kind of been everywhere. We'll go back to our normal Monday schedule as soon as possible. We appreciate everyone's patience. And yeah, we're excited to bring you an awesome episode this week. Don't forget to check out our sponsors at Oasis Games and the Mana Base. Oasis Games is the best place to buy Magic the Gathering singles. You can check them out at oasisgamesslc.com, mtgoasis.com, and oasisccg.com. You can get 15% off of your first order by using the code CCMTG at checkout. It is a legit place to buy Magic cards, and 15% is a pretty big deal. You can also get 4% off of every order by using the code Would That Be Good. I really do recommend Oasis Games. I spent all day today, all afternoon with the owner today. They are just an incredible place. They are a place that you should support. So check them out at oasisccg.com. You can also check out our other sponsor at the Mana Base. Just some awesome, great Magic content, up and coming Magic content site. Go to themanabase.com, and if you go there, you can also check out their store that they're associated with Fusion Gaming to get all of your sealed product. Oasis Games doesn't currently offer sealed product, and we wanted to give you guys a chance to go out and get some. So you can check them out at Fusion Gaming and at the Mana Base. Let's get right into the show this week. So, what is our first segment, Michael?
Well, it looks like our first segment is a patron question,
Why don't you go ahead and read that for us?
and it says, "How do you find the right place to be in the metagame? For example, in Modern, Grixis Death Shadow is strong. Decks have risen that target it. Do you play Grixis Death Shadow, a deck to beat it, or a deck to beat those decks targeting it? And is there a difference between like an SCG Open meta and a Grand Prix meta due to tournament size, type, whatever? In Standard, I've learned to just play the best deck or what seems to be the best deck. In Modern, I'm not sure if that works because the options are so great. So I feel like I'm lost."
And then his name is Mad Hustle.
I wasn't 100% sure if that was like if that was his name or just something that was in there. So I didn't want to, just like say that at the end of a question randomly.
Yeah, that is from our patron Mad Hustle. Michael, why don't you take the lead on this one?
Okay, so my feeling is that like it depends a little bit on what you think your range is, how you think the decks that you like stack up, and how good you think you are at actually predicting what a metagame is going to look like. So what I would say is don't play decks that you're not going to be able to play. Like if you've never played Affinity before, but you think it's well positioned, don't play it at a Grand Prix because it's going to be a bad time. It's not the kind of deck where positioning is going to, matter compared to just like experience. And I think that's true for a number of decks, certainly not all of them, but half to 2/3, I think, are just not the kind of decks you can just pick up and play. So if you're asking, do I play Grixis Death Shadow? If I've been playing Grixis Death Shadow, I don't think that because it's, now people think it's good, I don't think that I'm going to set it down because people are going to try to play decks that are good against it. I mean, if something is doing well, it's doing well for a reason. And I think if I believe that I can play this deck well, people thinking it's good is not necessarily a reason not to play it. When
I
you're
agree.
looking at decks, yeah, when you're looking at decks that like beat Grixis Death Shadow, it kind of depends. It depends when you say if there's a deck that you coincidentally believe has a good Grixis Death Shadow matchup, that might be a good choice. But I wouldn't go overboard, especially in Modern. there are just going to be there are so many people who they own what they own. They play what they play, and I think going really overboard trying to beat one deck is a recipe for disaster. Um,
I think there's a pretty core belief among Magic players that Modern is the play whatever you want format. And while I don't believe that's true, I think enough people believe that it's true that sometimes it makes it really hard to metagame. And I think that when it comes to something like Standard, where there's a lot of fluidity, where people are trading cards a lot because the cards are cheap and easier to trade, it makes it really easy for people to switch decks. Whereas in Modern, there are going to be people who like are probably still playing like Abzan Company. Like there's
yeah, you can just get locked into decks, right? Or like if you buy Affinity, this stuff doesn't really transfer into anything else very well, right? So
right.
if you buy Affinity and you play Affinity, like unless you're going to sell and rebuy Mox Opals all the time, none of those cards really go anywhere else. So
Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't stick to a deck that's likely going to be great for a long period of time, right? Like if you had picked Affinity, 2 years ago, you could still be playing Affinity. Like
oh
that's
yeah. Oh, and it would have been a good choice almost every single event during that time span, right?
yeah.
I mean, it's rarely been a bad choice. But what I would say is that I would caution against over metagaming in modern because people just don't move as much. They
Yep.
mostly play what they play.
Yep.
And when you're talking about playing then like the next level, like a deck beating the decks that are targeting the top deck, I feel like what you're really going to see is a lot of adaptation within existing decks rather than people like
Switching. Yeah.
bringing like a new level 1 or level 2 deck, I guess, and you're trying to be level 3. I would be shocked if that worked out very often. I mostly just think if you play what you can play best, there's a high chance that that is the best deck for you unless you really have a lot of prep time.
Yeah, I think this has been a solid answer. So thank you so much, Matt Hessel, for your question. Don't forget that you too can support the podcast going to patreon.com/ccmtg. Become a patron of the show. Every patron has access to a feed that allows them to ask these questions, and we really do appreciate them. Every one of you is very important to us, and we want to be doing what we can to helping you. And we hope that this question is a way to do that. So let's talk about our next segment really quick. Sorry, which is hashtag always improving. Hashtag always improving is kind of the point of this podcast. We believe if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And just like we want to be always helping our patrons improve, and you as our listeners, we also want to be doing what we can to be getting better all of the time. Magic's a pretty tough game. It's really really hard, and I it is.
To say the least.
And I think that it's really easy to get caught up in like little parts of Magic rather than a holistic view. But also sometimes like if you take too much of a holistic view, it gets even harder. And I think hashtag is improving is our moment to kind of reflect on our weeks and like, did we do anything to get better at Magic? How did we try and improve if we did? And Mike, why don't you go ahead and start?
Well, I mean, as always, I've just been trying to just play. I think the best way to keep yourself sort of sharp in between events where like so right now, I mean, the next event of any size I'll likely play is the Pro Tour, right? And there isn't really a lot to do to prepare for that at this stage. I mean, besides sort of keeping up with cards that are spoiled, knowing how the Amonkhet limited format works, and just trying to think about things.
Is the
But
Pro Tour before the next RPTQ?
I believe it is.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Um, yeah, I think the RPTQ is in August and the Pro Tour is at the end of July.
Okay, cool.
So I don't really have a lot to prepare for, like at the moment, just given that we don't have full information on what's in this set, but just trying to continue to keep playing, try to keep reasonably sharp, that kind of stuff.
What do you
Um,
mean keep sharp? So for the like there's been some controversy about things that we've said on this podcast recently, and we can kind of talk about them during this. There was a thread of comments when I talked about that I don't play enough Magic to like keep up with some people, and people, were talking about how LC mentions that he basically plays no Magic, and it's funny that he says that because he also, does like X number of drafts every set, right? Like 20, 30, 40 drafts every set. And I commented that compared to probably what LSV played like when he was getting very good at Magic, he does play basically nothing, right? But compared to
Right.
me right now, he still plays way more Magic than I do. So you, as you're trying to get better, you play like
I try to play a lot, and I think that mostly what it comes down to is like just the kind of carryover skills, the things like being observant and understanding game states and figuring out sequencing. Like I think that kind of stuff just isn't actually really very deck or format dependent, and mostly is just like a matter of habit and practice.
yeah.
Um, and it's easy for that stuff to slip a little bit. Uh, and sometimes you can cover that up a little bit with like format and deck specific knowledge. But I think just playing a lot and trying to play Magic where your brain is turned on, like where you're thinking about what's happening and you're trying to just process the game state
My
is really
dog
good
is
practice.
freaking out. Give me 1 second.
Fair enough. So I mean, basically, what I feel like goes into that is just trying to be aware of what's happening, why it's happening, and stuff like trying to get a read on what your opponent has. I think that stuff really carries over well format to format and isn't very like it isn't very deck or format dependent, and it's really valuable and limited as well. Like I think it's basically just a general Magic skill.
Sure.
So trying to stay sharp with that kind of stuff, I think really helps.
Yeah, so last week on the show I kind of talked about my my autopilot that I was suffering from at GP Las Vegas. I had started to play like a lot of Magic to try and get over that, really think about my lines. Um, and I really felt like I was starting to pay off. I went to a Wednesday standard at Oasis, played some Magic online, and really started to feel like I was thinking through all of my plays again. And I had a good weekend. I went and won a PPTQ, and really felt good throughout the PPTQ. There were a few like blunders along the way, but it really did feel like I was able to slow down my game and think about plays. Maybe a little too slow. I actually got warnings for like weird things, like forgetting to present my deck. I got snapped at for. Um, there's a couple things where like I just like was so focused on like the plays and like slowing down and like my sequencing that now I need to like probably get back to like having my mechanics correct again.
Just
But
remembering what playing Magic actually entails.
yeah,
Yeah.
like there was a couple of warnings that I got where like I like called the judge on myself and I got a warning. He walked like the judge walks away. He's like, "I'm so sorry." He's like, "Why are you sorry?" I knew I was gonna get a warning when I called the judge. like,
Yeah.
but I think that what was important is like I said like a lot in this segment. Is hashtag always improving. Is being able to identify what's on board, what's in your hand, and really thinking through plays, which is something that I wasn't doing in Las Vegas. And I think that I've been really rewarded for that over the last couple of weeks, and I'd like to continue doing that. And I think that watching Matt and Michael playtest like at the end of last week really helped me understand like how I need to be able to validate my decisions with commentary, even if it's just to myself. It's similar to like at my job where if I'm the product manager, right? So if I have an idea and I need it executed, it's really important that I'm able to vocalize to my developer, my designer, what I want them to do and why I want them to do it. And I think that I need to take the same approach to Magic where I'm really able to process what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think that one of the really key things like to winning more in the long run, but mostly feeling better about how you're playing is if you can justify a play, there's so much more to learn from. Like if you're just making decisions and not recognizing that there are actual paths, or you're not thinking about why your opponent is doing what they're doing, that kind of stuff. I think just like being really cognizant of what decisions are available to you and then making one and trying to think about why you think this one might be better
Yeah.
helps you learn so much more. And it's like it's not even important that you're right as much as it's important that you consider multiple options and have a reason for choosing one.
Yeah, I had a play in top eight where I had drawn maybe three cards. I was kind of getting flooded, and I was holding on to this Traverse the Evenwald because I was one card type short of Delirium, and I like held on to it for a couple of turns, and then I like counted my graveyard. Look at this, and I was like, if I just cast this now, I have Delirium. I get a land out of my deck, and and that turns so many other of my draws so much better. Um, I'm not like a big fan of deck thinning, but I think that in that situation it was super correct. And I don't think that I looked at that line. Like I didn't even the idea of just casting it for a land that late in the game seemed so bad to me. It ended up that getting that out of my deck and getting the shuffle was really great. I drew like an Ishkana or something, and like it was awesome. Uh, I think that being able to like cognitively see everything in front of you is really difficult. But if you're not actually trying to do it, it's basically impossible.
Well, and I think the thing is that ultimately, like, whether the decision is correct or not just isn't really the important part. It's
Not when
more
you're
about
making it.
it's more about seeing what decision points are available than it is about making the correct one. When you're, I mean, if you're playing for a pro tour top eight, right, you hope you make the correct play. But like when you're looking to like start improving on this stuff, I think just like being aware of the lines that are available to you
Yeah. I think
is
I think that's
as
important.
important as anything.
I think a big part of that is because then when you have a conversation about that decision with your friend, you have an actual conversation, right?
Right.
And
Exactly.
and you can speak to both points or as many points as possible. And that is a great way to improve.
Yeah, because then those conversations are productive and you actually learn from them. And whether your decision was correct or not, there's a conversation to have because you
Right.
found a decision point where before you might not have.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that the important thing for me this week is kind of just to follow through on the thing that I recognized that I was doing incorrectly in Magic, and then actually making an active effort to change that part of my game. I'm not saying I'm good at it now all of a sudden. I'm not saying that I'm back to where I was, 4 years ago, but I'm definitely in the right direction, and it encourages me to keep going. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of all you can ask for, right? Like,
yeah. Next up, we have our Deck Doctor segment. There is no Deck Doctor this week, but if you are one of our constructed critics, meaning if you donate $5 or more per month on Patreon, you can submit a deck to our Deck Doctor segment, and we'll talk about it on the show. We'll talk about what we love, what we would change, and where we think the deck stands today. And you can just go and post that in the constructed critics group. I also post a thread for them every once in a while as well, or you can just shoot me a message if you're one of our constructed critics, and we are happy to get that involved for you. So, let's talk about our next segment, which is power ranking. So every week on the show, we want to talk about the decks that are doing well in a given format. This week, we want to talk about the modern decks that are doing well right now. We so because of family stuff with my wife being out of town, we didn't have time to do the rankings the way we normally do it. So we are using MTGO again. So this is a percentage of the decks that we have available to us and what they represent of 5.0s on MTG Goldfish this week. So coming in at number 5 right now with 4.42%, we have Dredge. So this is your baby, Michael.
yeah, I still like this deck. I haven't played it as much recently, mostly because I feel like the level of hate is sort of outrageous. And this is a deck that is pretty easy to beat if you're trying. But I mean, I really like this deck. It has a really good matchup against one of the decks that did great this week. Um, and I think in general is just really strong. It's it's just linear and powerful. You will very rarely play this deck and end up feeling like you weren't playing the more powerful of the two decks.
What makes it feel so powerful in your mind?
You just get to sort of it feels like you're like cheating, right? You just like your opponent has to like cast spells and whatever, and you mostly just get to flip your deck upside down and put 20 power into play on turn 3 or 4.
Yeah. What do you think is keeping this deck in the rotation? Is it just the power of the
Yeah, I think it's that, and I think that it has a surprisingly reasonable grindy game when you play it well, and people get a little bit excited about like hate cards against it sometimes. And not that they're not good, they are obviously powerful, but it takes a little bit more than just a hate card. A lot of the time it takes your opponent actually playing those hate cards well. I also think if you just look at the decks above it right now, there are basically there are probably only two decks in the top 12 according to MTG Goldfish, maybe three, where I'm not very confident in my game one matchup. And
Yeah,
I think that counts for a lot.
yeah, and I think that it very much can be a game one deck depending on the way that the format shakes out. That being said, I've seen this deck beat a lot of hate still.
Yeah, it's you can definitely get there, and it depends on what your opponent has, right? If they have a hate card that's also in a great hand, very very tough. But if they mold a four and keep a Relic of Progenitus or whatever, yeah, good luck with that,
Sure.
right?
Awesome.
And it can kind of go it can go both ways.
Let's go into the next deck. The next deck is one after so many of our listeners' hearts, and that is Naya Burn, coming in with 5.52% of the metagame. Michael, what do you think of this deck right now?
I am not a big fan, but I also recognize that I am pretty biased against Burn. Uh, so I would be more curious actually to hear your thoughts on it. Given that
I think Naya
I,
is
I,
misleading.
well, yeah, they're playing a lot less green these days. It's mostly red white, right? Because people have basically cut Wild Nacatl at this point.
Yeah, I think that this deck is had to go this direction because you like basically can't have a creature game plan against um, Death Shadow, and I think that this deck actually is worse because of it. Because I think that the power of having that many Skullcracks in your deck, plus having the best creatures and Magic in your deck, it's just better than this plan.
Yeah, so I mean, you could definitely still play a Tarkus Commands
You
in the
could,
deck.
but it would be rough.
My
It's not
problem
the
with
same
this deck
thing.
is more fundamental. I just feel like your Dredge matchup is abysmal, your Affinity matchup is abysmal, and your Death Shadow matchup get a lot worse the better the player is.
Yeah, I do like that this deck has moved to the 4 of 4 of 4 of 4 of 4 of
Sure.
model.
Yeah, it's
That's
it's
not
really
not
great to look
appealing.
at. Yeah. No,
I,
it
I, I
is. And this is a deck that a lot of people really like. It's just one of those decks that's not for me.
I also don't understand. Um, oh man, I'm gonna be honest. I don't like this deck right now either. I think that your matchup against Death Shadow is not as good as its burn players seem to think it is, and I think that you see that when they play against a really good Death Shadow player. Um, I just I don't like a deck that has to board in Path to Exile when it's like against contrary to like its immediate game plan. I don't think that that makes for a very good deck.
Yeah, it's a little bit awkward, and it looks like a bunch of people are trying like ensnaring bridge now on the sideboard, and I feel like this deck is kind of getting pulled in a lot of different directions lately.
I
And
agree.
my least favorite thing about it is that you are a red-white deck that doesn't use the graveyard and doesn't have any artifacts, and because of how linear you are, you still can't play either of the hate cards.
Yeah, I think
It's just unfortunate,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I think that comments are saying Mike beat me at the RPG playing Burn with turn two Thought Not Seer too strong. So your opponent is here to tell us how
Oh,
strong. How
well, yeah, I mean, Thought Not Seer is just a good magic card against everything. If you cast it on turn two, it doesn't actually matter what the matchup is, right? I
sure.
mean,
Let's go on to our next deck. So our next deck we have, um, I think, I think one of my favorite decks in Modern. I know a lot of people don't like it as much as I do, but we do have a affinity list. Michael, what do you think of affinity right now?
so this is what won the Grand Prix, and Matt has a theory about Affinity, which I'm sure I said this last week, but I really like it. Um, it just it's basically that when people start playing main deck Kolaghan's commands, Affinity actually gets great because they start cheating on their sideboard cards.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I think that's true. I think that People have we did tell this story because I told the
Yeah,
Casey and my
we
blood
talked
pack.
about Mox Opals, and
Yeah.
because I was there the week last week. But this deck is just like it's an aggro deck that is also sometimes a combo deck and just does fundamentally unfair things, right?
Every time I see a list, I know that it was in the GP winning deck list. Every time I see Welding Jar, I cringe.
Yeah, I saw a guy playing four of them in a 5-0
It
list this week.
it is I if you want to play one or two of them, that's fine. But it other like we just talked about, sometimes you play things that are contradictory to your immediate game plan, and I feel like this is one of them.
Yeah, I know some people prefer like the third Mem Knight, and I know that at various points in time it's kind of been different cards. It just depends on what you're expecting to play against and what cards you expect to beat you. I like having that be a 0 mana artifact to make your opals better. But and I mean obviously Mem Knight is pretty low impact too, but it feels like one is about the upper limit of how many welding jars I'm willing to play in any deck.
Yeah, I think so too. Other than that, I really do like this deck. I like where it's positioned. I think that it's just too hard to like show up to a tournament with Affinity, not have a pretty decent chance of taking down the whole thing because too many people are going to cheat on cards. Your deck is super consistent. Your deck has probably the most powerful card in Modern in it. It just has a lot of things going for it.
Yeah, all that is true. The biggest issue really is just that it's not quite in the dredge category, but the hate cards against it are very good.
Yeah. Yep. Let's go on to the next deck. We have coming in with 8.04% of the meta. Michael, your favorite deck in Modern.
Eldrazi. Yeah, so this deck still, I think this deck is like pretty good against the Death Shadow decks, clearly, right? I mean, it's like if Bant Eldrazi was good in that matchup, you have Chalices in this deck and like Walking Ballistas, so I can see why that matchup is good. I would imagine all your Death Shadow matchups are pretty good. Um,
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
What is the possible reason to play less than four Chalice of the Void in this
Um,
deck?
Self-loathing, but we're already playing Eldrazi, so
But no, but there are lists. I
yeah,
just looked at the
I
list.
see it. I am looking at one right now that is playing three. My guess would be that just it's a lot worse on the draw than the play. Um,
Okay, it
I
seems so incorrect to me.
like so I see. I mean, there's a 5-0 list with only two.
Yes, that was the one I was specifically looking at.
I mean, the first
Here's
one,
the thing about
yeah.
Eldrazi Tron. I think that Endbreaker is a really powerful magic card when you get to have like if you want to be doing the most powerful thing on board, Endbringer can be that for you. True story.
Yep.
I think that a lot of the rest of what the deck is trying to do is really weird. I think that you diverge on your game plan a lot with this deck, and sometimes you have a Karn draw, and then sometimes you have a completely different draw that don't
I
often
yeah,
make
I
sense to
I
me.
hate Karn in this deck. I hate it so much. This deck is so bad at getting Tron. Like at least all his dust you can use the temples to cast it, and it actually wins the game like on turn 7 or whatever if that's when we get there. I hate Karn in this deck. It is
Why do you
so
hate it?
bad because you can never cast it on turn 3. I mean, you cast it on turn 3, you have to draw either natural Tron or map Tron. I mean, I don't know what the actual percentages on that are, but they're not good. And once you get past turn 3, it's just almost always worse than all his dust. Like Karn
Why
is really good when you play it on 3 and the board isn't out of control. But once the board starts to get away from you, Karn just doesn't do anything.
why do you believe this deck is so popular on things like the SCG circuit and even on Magic Online? Like, what makes this deck good? Like, we're obviously like kind of just talking crap right now. Like, what? Why is it good?
I think it can be difficult to play against. I think it's pretty good in that you can present a lot of different game plans in different matchups. And if you understand how to mulligan in different matchups, you understand how to sequence in different matchups, you have the tools to beat basically anything. Now, is that always going to come together for you? Probably not. But I think if you have like a big, it makes sense to me that someone like Todd Stevens has had a ton of success with this deck on the SCG circuit, doing a lot of play against players who are worse than he is, and he's really familiar with this deck, how to mulligan, how to sideboard, play and draw. Like I think he's just playing very optimal Magic playing this deck, and I think that goes a long ways. Like, and that being said, for all the for as much as I don't like this deck, you still have plenty of draws that are Chalice into Matter Reshaper into Thought on Seer into Smasher into All Is Dust or whatever. Like there are a lot of decks that's really good against.
Okay. Let's go on to our next deck coming in at number one with 13.09% of the meta. We have Gris's Death Shadow.
That is such a high percentage for modern. That's crazy.
It is really,
I
really
wonder what
high.
time period that's measured over, because that's like kind of outrageous.
I mean, I think it just gives you the entire time period, right? So it's measured from the 18th forward.
Interesting. Man, that's like actually it going back only that far makes me more surprised that this percentage is that high rather than less surprised.
Yeah, I think that this deck is kind of finding its stride. Like people have kind of determined some changes in numbers as well. Like a few weeks ago, we were kind of talking about how some of the numbers were kind of stuck, and it seems like people are changing some of that. So, for example, I've seen less Inquisitions in a lot of decks instead of the three that they were initially playing. Some people are like really increasing on Stubborn Denial, and as well as more of the big dudes. So, like some number of Tester and some of Gromag Angler is just universally accepted rather than a straight four of either one of them.
Yeah, they've
Which
they've usually been playing four combined, I think is the number.
right, which is still true, but it seems like it's pretty much two and two, two and two, two and two now, which I don't think was true for a little while there. What do you think is causing some of these slight changes that might make up a big percentage of the deck?
So my favorite change in this deck in particular is the swing back a little bit towards Lightning Bolt in the main deck. Mostly because people got so comfortable to not playing against it that you saw a lot of like Mirren Crusaders and stuff like that. Like I saw some of those at Grand Prix out of like both of the Hate Bears style decks that top aided. And I saw some burn players playing those out of their sideboards as well. So I think one of the cool things is when a deck has close to a solved 75, you can really throw a wrench in the way that people are trying to play against you by deviating on some of the choices where like realistically two or three stubborn denials isn't going to make that big a difference. I
Whereas
think
a couple of lightning bolts might actually, with Snapcaster, might make a huge difference.
yeah, or I think just when you're playing a deck like this, having any card that your opponent isn't playing around already counts for a lot. And even in the mirror where you would say lightning bolt is probably at its worst because it doesn't kill anything, it's still really powerful if your opponent doesn't expect you to have it in your deck because like bolt snap bolt kill you is so
Is
real.
a line
Yeah,
because
so
they can go pretty aggro on their own life total, and you can kind of
right.
just come out of
Right.
nowhere.
And if you know you're not going to get punished for it, it makes a lot of sense. If you know that your opponent isn't playing lightning bolts, and I think that given that that was the direction things were moving for a while, I know like Jerry's last list from a couple of weeks ago suggested no lightning bolts, three stubborn denials, and I think two terminates, two K commands. So some of the changes that like lean a little bit away from just the what have become adapted as the stock lists, I think can really give you an edge with these decks. And I think circling back to our patron question from the beginning, I think one of the ways that you can make decks like this work for you if you believe they're great is figuring out the actual best configuration and not necessarily just playing a stock 75.
I think so too, and I think that little changes are really important, and sometimes little changes can actually equal out to be really big changes. It's funny that you
Right,
say
right.
the
Yeah.
third stubborn denial is a big deal to you because when I saw that in some of these lists, I was like, this is a big deal. They're making a clear statement about what they believe is what the deck is trying to do. And go
Right,
ahead.
but you get mileage out of other people playing three. Right? People have to respect you representing stubborn denial more the more other people are playing, even if you're only playing two.
That's true.
Right. I mean, I think that there's like a lot of success with great decks comes down to sort of if your opponents aren't sure what to play around because you're good at representing multiple things and they can't figure it out, it puts you at a really big advantage.
Sure. Let's move on to our deck of the week. So we kind of talked about a lot of these modern decks throughout the last couple of I mean since Grixis Shadow became a thing. Let's talk really quick about our deck of the week though in modern, and that is Affinity. And I don't think it's the deck of the week because it won the GP for me. I think the reason it's the deck of the week is I think people don't understand Affinity. Because for a lot of people, they see it as this hyper aggro deck that's super easy to play, and I just don't believe that's true. In fact, I believe it basically to be not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think this deck is mostly incredibly difficult to play.
What do you think makes that true?
Um, because you have to be able, so in the pre-board games, that's maybe a little bit less true because oftentimes your opponents just won't have cards that can really compete with what
They
you're
haven't
doing.
kept a hand that can keep up.
Right. So like you're on the play and they keep a hand that's like fetch shock thoughtseize and you literally just play 6 cards and then they go to 15 and basically just die.
Yeah,
Right. So like you win a lot of games that are pre-board where your opponent just gets screwed because what they have just doesn't line. Or I mean, sometimes they even thoughtseize you on the play, but you know you had double Ravager or whatever, like plating Ravager, and they take one and you kill them with the other real easy.
right.
But in the boarded games, trying to figure out what your opponent has, how you're going to play around it, how you're going to mulligan based on that, it's incredibly difficult. Matt and I spent a bunch of time this week playing Affinity, and I mean, I like to think we're both at least okay, but neither of us has played a bunch of Affinity, and it is so hard. It's just so incredibly difficult to put your opponent on specific cards and then try to give yourself outs to beat them while also not over sideboarding, right? Because the secret is your opponent like might have Stony Silence, but if you just have Mox Opal, Memnite, Signal Pest, or whatever, like you can sometimes just easily crush
Yeah,
even good hate cards. But you know, if
and,
they have a Pyroclasm and you have that hand, you just die.
and I think it's important to note that like we're not saying that the deck is hard to play in a way that's like you can't if you're not good at Magic, you can't play this deck because this deck is the most powerful deck in modern probably. But what we when we saying that it's hard to play, what we really mean is it's hard to play optimally. So because of the power level of the deck, because of the speed of the deck, and I think that's why people think it's so easy to play. They're like, no, dude, like this guy that's not that good at Magic, he just like goes and wins all these tournaments with it. I think that's pretty easy to play. It's like, well, no, but like if you put this guy that's like winning all these local events in a Grand Prix with the deck, and he's not that good, he's gonna lose a lot more because he has way more decisions and way more opportunities to mess up against players that are better. And that's what we mean by it's hard to play. It's hard to get like there's there's this amount of wins that you get from X amount of skill, right? And X amount of power from your deck and X amount of speed from your deck and whatever, right? But then there's all the wins you get after that. And this deck is really hard to pick up those wins.
It reminds me a lot of Infect in that sense. Like you get a lot of games where your opponent just basically had no chance. Like, you know, where you played like Glistener Elf and they didn't play a creature and then they just died on turn 2. But in but the thing is that like basically I think anyone can win 35 to 40% of their games with Affinity as long as they can basically evaluate bad hands and ship them back and not, you know, make incredibly bad punts.
Yeah.
But turning it from, you know, a medium bad deck to a great deck, squeezing out, you know, all these games where you need to get every single point of damage exactly perfect is incredibly difficult. And just the fact that the hate cards against this deck are so good, you know, that you have to figure out how you're going to try to beat Stony Silence or uh, Kolaghan's Command or Anger the Gods or Buy Force or whatever. I mean, there are just so many cards that are great at Ancient Grudge, so many cards that are great against you that you're trying to figure out how to give yourself the best chance to beat all of these cards in a given game and given match is incredibly tricky.
Yeah. What do you think that the key cards in this deck right now? Like, if you're gonna play Affinity, like, what are your must-haves? Because I think they've changed. And maybe I'll start actually, because I think
Yeah,
it didn't used to be this way, but I think now it's 4 Steel Overseer. I
a
think that
hundred
if you,
percent.
yeah,
Yes.
4 Steel Overseer, 4 Alkbarn Ravager, four Plating, 4 Galvanic Blast, 4 Mox Opal, 4 Springleaf Drum, 4 Ornithopter, 4 Signal Pest, 4 Vault Scourge. Those ones are auto includes.
They're
Where
close. Galvanic Blast sometimes is
I
more of a it's
hey
more of a metagame call though, right?
hey
Like there are metagames that exist where you might want like three in a thought cast or where
actually,
people
I'm not
just
gonna
play
lie. If
three.
you literally just took the welding jar out of the list on our screen and put in one Thoughtcast, I would literally play this list.
Sure. Um, but I think that like the Etch Champion Master of Ethereum split is up for debate.
Yeah,
The number of Memnites is up for
yep.
debate. The Welding Jar is very clearly up for debate. The Glimmervoid Spire or Blinkmoth Nexus split is up for debate. I've seen people playing like five total Rainbow lands and three Blinkmoths a number of times.
That seems
Um,
incorrect to me. I'm sure that like it's something that you can do, but I don't think that I would approve.
it depends on the colored spell mix
Sure.
and
So like if
right,
you're like playing like 3 Thoughtcast, 4 Galvanic Blast, you probably actually have to do
right.
you have to jump through some
You
hoops.
can't play a second basic, but you have to play one, and you can't cut Darksteel Citadel or Inkmoth Nexus. So
Sure.
and you're not probably really looking to play 18 lands. So it's just sort of the way things stack up. And then the sideboard is kind of whatever
So
you feel. It's basically two Etch Champions, two Gear per Aether Grids, generally two Thought Seizes, and the rest is kind of up for debate.
I think that they usually play Ancient Grudge. They have for a little while. Um,
Okay.
Other than that, I think also Whip Flare is probably one that is pretty common. But between like
Yeah.
Dispatch, Spell Pierce, what are some other ones? I could just look at the deck on our screen, but
I
I think
mean,
Blood
people
Blood
Blood Moon here and
Blood
there,
Moon.
Wear Tear. This
Yeah.
the one that won the GP was playing Rest in Peace. Uh, I just mean that because you have access to like literally every color,
Oh yeah. Your sideboard options get pretty big.
you can kind of go hard with the sideboard if there's a card you think is good, you certainly can play it,
Right.
right?
And when I say that I believe that I don't believe that Galvanic Blast is a flex slot, it's because I actually believe right now you would be incorrect not to play 4.
And that may well be true. I'm mostly just noting
In the past, that hasn't
that
been true.
at times I think
Right.
Death Shadow specifically makes Galvanic Blast better than it has been because you will frequently get opponents who have to go under 10 life. Sort of and it makes your like reach spells a lot better. But there have been times in the past where Galvanic Blast has been less good. So mostly just noting that for kind of posterity's sake. Although I
Yeah.
do agree with you that right now
Yeah.
the fourth
And
Galvanic Blast is almost certainly correct.
I think that when you think about it's like it versus some of the key matchups, I think that's kind of the beauty of Affinity is that because you're playing 5 colors and because sideboards are so important, you're really able to like play the right sideboard cards for what you need to do in so many matchups. That I think a lot of decks don't have access to that Affinity does, and it makes the skill of deck building and sideboard card selection really important.
Absolutely. I think and then it's not only just actual card selection, but how you sideboard, making sure you're not over sideboarding. Affinity is a deck that really rewards building kind of a 75, right? You're trying to build like a bunch of different 60s for different matchups, with the idea being that you just need different things in different places. And it's, you have to be a little bit careful because you really can't sideboard more than about four cards, maybe five at any given time is about the absolute upper limit. So you need to be really cognizant of your cards being high impact. Uh, it's a lot better if they cost 2 mana is really where you'd like them to be, 2 mana or less. Uh, Aether Grid is kind of an exception because it's one of the only ways you can really beat Stony Silence reliably. Extra Edge champions are usually replacing the Masters when they come in, so
Yeah.
they don't quite count in the same way. But all the other sideboard cards outside of occasionally Blood Moons are they're almost always 2 or 1 mana cards. And I think, if you've played very much Affinity, that's just reflective of kind of just the mana source count in the deck. It's very, very lean.
Yep. I think that will do it for our Deck of the Week segment. If you have any thoughts or comments about Affinity, please post them. Modern season is coming up for a lot of PPTQ players, basically all of them. And it's going to be important that they understand what to play against, how to play against it. And so if you have thoughts, please leave a comment. Start a discussion. I think that Modern is probably in the best place it's ever been for a PPTQ season, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think that the decks are really fun and thought-provoking to play against. I think that the Death Shadow matchups, as frustrating as Thoughtseizes can be at times, Modern feels remarkably fair.
Yeah.
I feel like the fair decks, I mean, if you're going to class Death Shadow as a fair deck, the fair decks are much better than the unfair decks right now.
Yeah, and I think overall, just the games, like you said, are fun and engaging, which is pretty important. Let's go on to our next segment of the show. So every week on the show, we want to talk about something that's going to make you better at Magic or life in general. And this one is very much a life in general topic that we're applying to Magic. So these are actually my favorite training grounds. I think they're the most thought provoking ones when applied in the right way. I think that they can just kind of drastically improve you as a person and really improve your Magic game too. And so today we want to talk to you about solution based thinking. So, in product, in my job, and when you are if you read anything from people who work in the tech industry, one of the common things that you'll hear about is the problem to be solved. So when you have an idea or when you have something you want to do, it's important to understand what the problem you're trying to solve is, because your decisions are going to be based around that problem. And one thing that I believe pretty strongly is that when you are trying to solve problems, whether that be the cards in your deck list, whether that be the attack step that you're going through, right? These are problems that you're trying to solve. And I think that if you approach them with the idea of trying to find a solution, right? This problem to be solved, right? We're trying to find a solution, that it becomes easier to find that solution because you get in the habit of thinking this way. Um, it's it's not enough to know that there's a problem, because people can identify problems all over the world, right? Homelessness is a problem. That's great. Go fix it, right? Like, there are really big, intense problems, and Magic is full of a lot of really little ones that you have to go out and solve, right? They're all within your capabilities. But if you don't focus on finding the solutions for the problems, all you have is just a bunch of problems sitting in front of you.
I agree with that. I think just it's important to keep your mind focused on finding the solutions to the problems for a bunch of reasons. But I think that one of the main things that you really highlight there is, like, identifying problems is a lot easier than figuring out solutions sometimes. But it can also be really deflating if you start feeling like you're really good at identifying problems and really bad at solving them, because you can come with this great big list of things that are, creating trouble for you in a matchup or whatever, but a lot of the time solving them is hard enough that if you're not focused on that as just the way you approach, if you're not focused on that as the way you're approaching these problems in general, it's really, really difficult to stay positive.
Yeah, and there's a lot to this when you kind of break it down. There's a certain defeatist attitude about kind of what you just said, right? Where when you're going into a project or an attack step, right? Like, let's just use the attack step. I think this is like a really good one for that. Where if you're going into the attack step, knowing that at the end of the day, you have to make a decision on that attack step, and you want to solve this combat phase rather than entering the combat phase and then deciding what to do. Those are completely different approaches. Like, from a deep level, you are saying two different things. One of them is saying, I am now in combat, what do I do? And one of them is saying, I'm entering combat to find the correct solution to this combat phase. Or I've entered this combat phase knowing the solution that I'm entering it with. Right?
Right. And I think also understanding that ultimately everything is going to kind of boil down to one bigger problem, right? Like, so you're looking at this like, okay, how do I win this combat phase? Okay, well, maybe I can't win this combat phase. If I can't win this combat phase, how do I make this game not about the combat phase? Right? Or if you're looking at like what deck you're trying to play in a format, you can either say, oh, well, I don't think any of these decks beat this deck. You might decide, is this actually a problem? Can I punt this match? And I think just like looking looking for not just problems, but what does this problem actually mean? Sort of how big a problem is it in prioritizing which problems you're looking to solve, right?
Prioritization is pretty important when you have this mindset, because what happens is, too often in any kind of solution based mentality is you want to be rich in solutions, right? So you want a solution for every problem that's in front of you, and that becomes daunting and also distracting to the bigger picture. So the deck building one is a really good example of this, where if I'm going to go out and build a deck that needs to win a tournament, right? Like let's say we're starting from ground zero. In fact, let's use that tournament the PPTQ that you beat me in the finals of at Fungo Bongo, right? So
Yeah, sure.
going into this event, I was starting from basically ground zero. I'm like, I believe that we still have the tools to build like this green red ramp deck, and uh, mono white aggro had just come out, and so and I believe that basically the only two decks I needed to beat were mono white aggro and Bant Company. And so I was like, okay, this is the problem that I have in front of me is I need to beat these two decks with these two colors. And then came up with a solution from there. Now, if you're going out and building a deck, right, that needs to beat 17 other decks, it's a lot harder, right?
I think this is often a problem. I like to play a lot for Grand Prix prep. And I think that that's mostly a good thing because it gives me a lot of information. The problem is that you mostly find that, like, what you kind of secretly knew to be true is also true, that, no deck beats everything. And you can end up just, being sort of disillusioned with the options available to you because it's like this, right? Sometimes if you play decks enough to see the problems, but aren't great enough with them to find enough solutions, you end up feeling like every deck has all these bad matchups, but because instead of I felt like this happens just to me personally a lot, but I'll be like playing a deck, right? And initially it starts out great. You think, oh well, maybe this deck is really good and it's a little bit under the radar right now. No one else is really playing it. I think this could be a good choice. So you play a bunch of games with it and you start out doing pretty well. So you keep playing, but as you play more and more, you discover that some of the matchups you thought were really good are like maybe not quite as good as you thought, or you play against some new stuff that you hadn't really considered before, and these matchups are bad. So now you're starting to see problems come out of the woodwork, right? But if instead of putting time into the mastery of these decks, you're just trying to jump on another one and see if that one is good against everything. The secret is that probably nothing beats everything because it would
Yeah,
have already been found.
exactly.
And because you're looking at this from a what are the problems with this mindset rather than how do I fix the problems with this mindset, it's really easy to just kind of get caught up in putting your effort into solving an unsolvable problem rather than the problems that are in front of you
Right.
that you actually can improve and solve.
Solution based thinking doesn't mean that you have to find the solution for beating 8 rack with a deck that can't beat 8 rack. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is 8 rack even part of the problem when you're trying to find the solution? Like, or are you just including a variable that really doesn't matter?
Well, and even beyond that, even if the variable does matter, I mean, you might say that, like, oh, well, I don't think my affinity matchup is very good with this deck. But you might also say, but overall, I think my set of matchups are better with this deck than anything else. So sometimes, when you get really focused, hyper focused on the problems, you end up putting yourself in these positions where you aren't giving yourself solvable problems, basically. You're giving yourself problems that the real problem is unrealistic expectations, right?
Right.
And the idea that you're going to be able to figure out a solution for every single problem with a deck in a format like Modern or Legacy is just crazy. So, it's I think really the takeaway from like that specifically, what I feel like I've learned over the last, this is something really just over the last month or so. I feel like I've, like, just in retrospect, looking at Grand Prix Las Vegas and my deck choices and how I would like to re-prepare for an event like that. I think I would just like to be a little more honest with myself about what is a fair expectation for a deck in testing,
Yeah.
and try to be a little more open to to being able to accept something that isn't perfect. And I think that that kind of ties into a lot of, like, when you're thinking of solutions, right? When you're building a deck. So if you're building this ramp deck, right? You say, okay, these are the two decks I'm going to beat. Now it's possible you're going to play against something. You play against something playing a bunch of counter spells or whatever, and because you're playing a bunch of roasts and fiery impulses in the main to beat the other two matchups, it feels bad, right? So this is a problem in some senses, but you already found a solution for the problems you were really trying to solve because other problems crop up.
Doesn't
You
mean
have
that
to,
you didn't find a
right,
solution.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
You have to accept that on some level.
Yeah, let's go out of the deck building side of this. And there's a term that Magic players hear a lot, and I don't feel like they realize that it's actually solution based thinking, and that's playing to your outs. The idea of this is that you are presented with a scenario in front of you, and your job is to figure out what the solution to the scenario is, and then play the game accordingly. That is the definition of solution based thinking. That what you just did, if you did it correctly, is you found the problem, identified the things that you can do to solve this problem, and then played accordingly.
And then gave yourself the
The
highest
the highest
percentage
percentage
chance.
chance to
Yeah.
win.
I
I
oddly, yeah, it's funny you say that because I, I can feel so frustrated in deck building, but it's sort of the same thing, right? Like you're sort of you're sort of doing the same thing, and in play, I find that to be one of the most satisfying things, even when you don't win.
Right. And there are so many times where my opponents will like look at their 6 card hand and like stare at it. And I'll look at them, I'll be like, listen, man, I don't know what this hand is that you're looking at. I can tell it's not good. Mulliganing does not decrease your chances to win a game. It increases your chance to win the game when done correctly. So if you cannot win with this 6 card hand, you should mulligan it. Like, I am
Right.
giving you friendly advice. Like, don't have us have a 2 second game. Don't go land, go, draw, discard, scoop. That's not fun. I would much rather play against good five. And the thing is that people don't look at the mulligan as the solution, they look at it as the problem. They think
Right.
mulliganing is the problem, when in fact mulligan is the solution to the problem that you don't have any lands in your hand.
Right. Well, it's kind of, you don't lose because you mulligan, you lose because the hand was bad. Right? You mulligan when a hand is bad, but it's not the mulligan that's making you lose. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think that, yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like I always feel like the games where I am most engaged are the ones where I am trying to figure out what this game is going to come down to, and then trying to sort of twist it around to give myself the best chance for my deck to and my play to put me in a winning position.
yeah.
And I think that it's really interesting to think about it from that point of view because it can be so frustrating if you let it. But I think if you can take a little bit of your own focus off of the result of the game or the match, or and instead try to focus on just actually solving the problems that are put in front of you, right? Like
It's like mini
if right,
victories. Here
right,
here's the thing, and this is kind of our next point is that solution based thinking actually brings the positive to a problem solving game, right? Where if all you're doing is trying to identify problems, like we said before, that can get daunting, right? And like after a match, right, you go step away from the match, and you're like, dude, he had this and this and this and this. I had no outs. I couldn't think of anything I could do, and like if you approach it the if you approach that game just a little bit differently, where at the end of the day, like you solved many problems throughout the game, like Michael said, it can feel rewarding. And
Definitely.
this happens at work all the time. I've had throughout my entire I've been had a job since I was 14 years old, and I see this time and time again that people just what they'll do is they'll sit there and identify problems in the workplace, right? But they won't do anything to solve them. And Magic is it is so easy to identify a thing that went wrong, and we do it all the time, right? Where if we just focused instead on finding solutions to every problem that came in front of us, we would have those immediate victories. We would be happier. It is a proven fact that while you are happier, you have better cognitive thinking. Like everything goes better when you have this mindset, and it's so easy to do. It really is. It is. If there is one thing that you can do, Michael and I talk about mulligans is the perfect example because Michael and I have like big proponents of this. That making the correct mulligan decisions, at the end of the day, if you were just display, it's actually really easy. Like you all know what a bad hand of magic cards looks like. Like you know what it looks
Right.
like.
Right.
And every time that you look at that bad hand and you know it's a bad hand and you're trying to decide whether or not to look at it, you're justifying it, right? You're trying to justify the problem in front of you and think it's not as big as a problem it is and ignore the solution that's in front of you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thinking back to one of the things I like about putting the focus on solving problems rather than the problems being presented to you sometimes is like, so I was playing a bunch with Matt the other day, and I'm playing Dredge, and we're playing through this league online, and I'm playing against an Eldrazi Tron player who, in the sideboarded games, I believe has like Relic, Cage, and Surgical. So it is a lot of cards, but I don't even remember how the games ended up going. I don't really even remember anything else about the league except that I found one really sweet play to beat a Relic of Progenitus that required me to do something kind of unorthodox. And putting the focus in the moment instead of being like, oh, look at all these cards he has that are so good against me, but instead like, okay, so he might have another one next turn. If he does, that's fine, but I'm going to try to beat this specific one right now.
That's so
How
great.
can I do that? And I think just like putting the focus on, so what is the play in this spot, makes it feels really, I think so. I think I ended up losing the game, but I was rewarded for the play that I made on that turn. And it felt really good just to be
Right.
like, oh, hey, that play actually worked. That was really cool. Um, and but even that isn't really the important thing, right? Sometimes you're going to make that play and not get rewarded for it, and things will still go badly. But I think recognizing all of this kind of goes back to your always improving moment, right? It's like if we recognize all the points where we have decisions and where we have control, we can take a lot of the feel bads of variance out of the game, because instead of focusing on it, we can focus on all the chances we had to like actually affect the outcome through decision making.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's actually always important what the outcome actually is, as much as just like feeling like whether or not your decisions impacted the outcome they could have, so you made the best play possible.
Yep. I think that's a wrap. I think we've kind of covered our thoughts on this, and I hope that people understand the point we're trying to get across, because it's 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 what's the word I'm looking for? It is very semantic what we're talking about. Like the difference is razor thin, and it's really easy to be caught on the other side.
But I think ultimately it really, I know for me, it impacts my enjoyment a
It
lot.
does. It
When I
does for
find
me too.
myself slipping into the kind of complaining side of things, I notice that I don't want to play.
Yeah.
The game doesn't feel as creative or fun when you're spending your time thinking of the reasons you're losing rather than what you could possibly do to get out of the situation you're in.
Yep. Don't forget that you can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/ccmtg to become a patron of the show. Every single dollar is really important. When when we are where we are right now, like every dollar really does help. It means the absolute world to us. Um, there, the next goal right now is to upgrade equipment. We are excited to continue to bring you Card of the Week and all the other stuff that we're doing. We would like to make the show better, and we want to use the Patreon to do that. I do have an update that Michael's token will be done. I'm told I will be sent a copy of it tomorrow morning. And as we met our token goal, I will be going in to go and get those tokens created and sending them to all of our patrons of $3 or more. So if you are a patron of $3 or more per month, you'll be receiving those tokens, and there will be tokens of me, Manny, Casey, and Michael. So you'll even get some of the old co-hosts to
It's just value right there.
right. You get Manny, who's Mike's overlord in this world apparently,
Yeah.
and it's pretty cool. So if you can support the show, every dollar is appreciated. If every listener of the show donated $1 more per month, um, we would be able to quit our jobs. It would just change our lives. So if you're listening and you have the funds, it means the world to us. I have a mini update on that listener number, by the way. So I got the numbers from MTG Cast today, and I have been kind of pushing people away from MTG Cast onto our platform for a while, and our numbers went up on MTG Cast, and I don't know why. Um, and uh, other shows went down, and ours went. I literally don't know how this happened. Anyway, the long story short, uh, I didn't post last week's podcast when I said I was leaving it when that we were going to leave MTG Cast in a few weeks to MTG Cast, and then I didn't get any feedback from people who listen to MTG Cast. So I was like, apparently nobody's listening there, and so um, currently I will not be taking us down from MTG Cast. Uh,
Except for the times that it happens unintentionally.
yeah, except for the times I
Yeah.
have an
Yeah.
accident.
Fair enough.
Uh, I still encourage you. It is better for us if you go and subscribe to if you are listening and if you want that podcast guaranteed every time, uh, go subscribe to our feed. Leave us a review. It means the world to us. We really, really appreciate it. Michael, where can people find you other than on MTG Cast?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me all kinds of places. You can find me on Facebook. My name is Michael Hinderacker. You can also find me on Twitter, where my handle is at MagicMikeMTG.
You can find me on Facebook at Spencer Stephen Halland. You can find me on Twitter at Spencer13H. You can find me in the Constructive Criticism Facebook group where you can find a bunch of other awesome listeners. If you're a patron of $5 or more per month, you can find me in the Constructive Critics group where as we will soon be figuring out how we will be sharing PT deck lists at what level, at what like how it will be done, and that will be the place that you will have access to them as soon as we decide to make them available. We don't know how that will work this time, but if you're interested, donating $5 or more per month, you can get access to that group. Uh, you can also find me on limited time only. So I never talk about this on the show. It's terrible of me. I don't know why I don't do it, but we have a limited version of this show called Limited Time Only with Silver Pro Danny Cathro and myself. It's a little bit shorter. It's like a 45-minute show to an hour show. It's really fun. This one's going to be like an hour and like this one's gonna be short. I am really happy. I love it when they're shorter. It means that it means that I think we were really focused. But yeah, check me out on Limited Time Only with Silver Pro Danny Cathro every week there as well. You can follow the podcast at CCMTG on Twitter. You can also find us on Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/CCMTG. And you can find us on the Mana Base, which is one of our sponsors. So check out the Mana Base. All right. So, oh yeah, thank you so much to the voice in my ears. Our technical producer has reminded me that the Patreon episodes are coming back. We will be recording them every fourth Friday and then posting them immediately after. They will actually include me, Danny, and Michael, and they'll actually be hosted by our technical producer. So the role that I typically take on the podcast, which is like the host role, I kind of take like a host role slash it's different. Whereas in these shows, we're gonna have the producer literally just asking us questions and running the show, and I'll act kind of in the role that Michael is in. So they should be good. We're really excited about them. So those will be coming back. So if you are a Patreon, you will have access to those. You can go to patreon.com to get those. Yeah, let's go. Let's go on. I literally just lost the show notes. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like
Well,
trying to find them.
I'm pretty sure that what we have coming up next. Let's see. You
It
can
should
also
be.
join the conversation
Oh
in
yeah.
the Facebook group.
No, I
You
already
can
said that.
search construct. Okay, so you can do that. You can also join our Discord page, which is linked from the Facebook group.
Yeah, it's also in the there's a page on constructorcriticism.com, the bios page I think it's called, or the contact page that has all of this. So if you go to constructorcriticism.com, go to that contacts page, you can get all of that information. It makes it way easier. You can just click the links, go directly to the places that you want to go to be in contact with other people and with us. And you can join the clan. You can message me on MTGO at Spencer13Dev. And I'd be happy to add you. I am on MTGO a lot more lately. And also, I have my streaming computer set up, so I have a camera, two monitors. Everything was my computer blew up, but I got it fixed, and now I can stream. And I
It
already,
it unblew up now.
yeah, yeah. And shout out to Keaton, who's one of our listeners, who hooked me up. It was like $40 to fix.
Oh, that's like so much better than something blowing up sounds like it should be.
Yeah, because if it hey hadn't helped me, it probably cost me like 200 to $300. So go
Yeah.
him. Hashtag would that be good? Hashtag would that be good is the other way that you can join the conversation. If you tweet it, we'll read it, as Michael likes me to say. Um,
So
apparently,
starting on, yeah.
apparently, we'll read the F word according to me the other
Yeah,
week.
that's what I learned last week. Got to be
Let's
careful.
let's start with
It looks like the first one is you. Chandra +1 cast incendiary flow kill scrap heap scrounger hashtag easybbgg hashtag would that be good?
uh yeah. So hashtag
It sounds great.
EVPG. Um, so I actually think that Insanity Flow is actually really good right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think so too. Like it makes sense. It like people are playing cut to ribbon sometimes.
yeah, I think that Flow is pretty powerful right now. I have a few deck lists that I'm like, and after seeing some of the spoilers, like I definitely know the direction I'm going to be going to try and help the team for the Pro Tour and help me for the RPTQ. And we'll see what we can come up with. But I can tell you that a lot of them will probably have Chandra and Incendiary Flow in them because I think that they're really good right now. And I don't think that's what it's.
Chandra's powerful. Like
Yeah,
it's as long as you can protect her from Heart of Kirin, that's always, always the issue with planeswalkers in general these days. But like being able to go Chandra into spell is like really
it's
tough.
so good. It's so good. Somebody plus their Chandra against me and cast. It might have been Incendiary Flow, which caused me to be like, why is not everybody doing this? This was so good.
Yeah, I mean there was a minute where Oath of like, with the Felidar
Chandra
Guardian
plus
stuff
Oath.
where
Yeah.
Chandra Oath of Chandra was like always the beating, right? Because you'd be playing a deck and you're like, well, if they have to minus, I can just Chandra to kill their Chandra. But if they get to plus and then Oath your guy, you're just like, oh, this is so bad for me.
Smallplex plus Jace, Verin's Prodigy. Hashtag good. Scotty, I think you're great, man.
I don't know
Don't.
that this would be good.
I don't know what you're drinking. Put it down. Put it away.
So,
This one would not be good.
like, I get the idea, which is like the second what's more annoying than the first smallpox, the second smallpox. But you got to actually flip your Jace first. And like, I also probably want to play Flagstones of Trocaire, right? And like that, Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Flagstones of Trocaire, Smallpox just sounds really ambitious.
Yeah, this one's Scotty. You got some great ideas. You are historically one of my favorite people on Twitter, but I'm not a fan of this one. But
It's a tough sell.
yeah, this
It's a
one's
tough
this one's a
sell.
little tough. Took down a PPTQ today with Green Black Snake Delirium. Hashtag MTG. Hashtag really good. It was really fun. It was really good. The deck was
Yep.
great. I really enjoyed the deck all day long. I've enjoyed this deck a lot.
It's powerful. Like
Yeah,
Winding Constrictors. Well, I mean, the only
dude,
card I would say is like
dude.
consistently more power. It's like that and like Unlicensed Disintegration are
So
like
I'm
the
at
two
like a
cards that
semi
just
board
feel
stall.
unfair.
I'm at a semi board stall. I have two constrictors in play and a Nissa. So I'm about to break the board stall anyway.
Right.
And and I have like a walking ballista that I'm kind of activating to like shoot down his guys to kind of end the board stall. And I crack a clue and draw a third walking ballista, or draw a third winding constrictor. Draw for my turn, draw a fourth winding constrictor. Look at the Nissa in play. Look at all my mana, and I'm like, I don't know that I need to do this math. Constrictor, constrictor, activate ballista minus Nissa. I'm pretty sure you're dead.
Yeah, take 30.
He's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, so yes,
So
that's
Winding Constrictor
11.
gets 10 counters.
Yeah. That's so I have 11 counters on my walking ballista. You have 11 toughness. Kill all your guys. Kill you?
Yeah, that seems powerful. I don't think I've ever had all four, but
I hadn't either. And like when I started to do the math and I was like, oh, it's just 5 counters for every. That's enough. I don't.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Whatever. That's happened to me a couple of times with playing against like Anointed Procession recently. So it is not like Whining Constrictor where it's like +1, it like doubles every time. So there have been a couple of times where I've had opponents with like an Anointed Priest and a anointed and multiple Anointed Processions where like the game is close and they're at like 3. They gain like 15. Like, okay. And they gain like 60. Like, oh. And they gain like 250 and you're like, oh, man. They're at 300 life. That seems like so much.
Yeah, yeah, it does seem like a lot. It does seem like many much. Next up, we have just finished a 90-minute gym workout with at CCMTG on my ears. Hashtag MTG fitness is real. Hashtag would be good. Does that answer your question, Michael?
I just didn't realize that was a hashtag. I mean, I understand that there are probably people who play Magic who also, work out or whatever. It was just the hashtag that threw me before.
Oh yeah, it's a thing. I use MTG fatness sometimes. Uh, when I'm like eating a large meal, I'll be
Yeah, I
like,
feel like that
just
would be a way
just add
more
a steak.
appropriate
Hashtag
hashtag for
MTG
me.
fatness. Yeah.
Yeah.
1-1 so far. Split my rounds versus zombies. Plan on winning out from here. Hashtag will be good. Andrew did not win out. Spoiler alert. Uh, not as good. Not as good, Andrew. Gonna stream some Red Green Pummeler at Twitch. Why am I using hashtag really good that so much this week? I tried to stop, but like I don't know. I just kept doing it. It
Spin out
was
of
fun.
control.
I did pummel people, and it was great. It was
It's a
great.
good feeling, isn't it, when you're just like, oh, it's turn 4, take 20.
Played a PPTQ in Washington State with 3 other members of the CCMTG family. Half of us made top 8. Hashtag always improving. Hashtag whether we good. That made me really happy to see that like people were traveling to like play with each other from our group of listeners.
Yeah,
Um,
that
it,
was
it
cool.
like it actually really warmed my heart, and congratulations to those of you who made top 8. Um, I'm glad to see you guys are getting together and trying to improve. I honestly believe that constructive criticism has the best community in all of Magic. I think we're just kind to each other. I think that we're all trying to improve. We all have similar goals, and it's just really fun to watch. So, one of PPTQ yesterday with this list. Hashtag would be good. This is from Ray. Hashtag making Bracella in the finals. Wait, what happened? What is this deck?
Says Bruna and Gisela on the board. I don't really understand why I would play this over Mardu, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, is it just black white?
Yeah, it's just Mardu and then you cut the broken card in the deck.
Interesting. I wonder if
I mean, you have like more total removal, but I don't know. I've never felt like the mana is really that bad in Mardu.
I wonder why. Um,
I mean,
I'm
the
sure
mana looks great, and you can like side into a
that's
bigger. You side into the actual Planeswalker
I
control deck
I
way
was gonna
better.
say I was gonna say that it looks like the sideboard plan is like significantly better, and the
Well,
the mana definitely is better.
yeah, I mean it's if you want to side into a bigger deck anyways, I can see the appeal. I think the secret is that most people sideboard into the Planeswalker deck way too much in Mardu. Like
Sure.
it was really good when no one expected it. I don't think it's that good now that literally everyone expects it every game in every matchup, play or draw, because people just do it literally all the time, no matter what.
Sure. Timothy says brewing up a standard black green deck with Gitrog Monster and Ruma Map Excavator ramping into Big Ulamog or Torment of Hell or yeah Torment of Hellfire. Is the Excavator the one
It's
that
got to be the Crucible on a stick, right?
okay?
It's got to be the yeah.
What do you think of that?
I feel like Gitrog Monster and Ramp cards are just kind of a odd couple.
I think
Like
that
it's really hard to cast Ulamog when you're sacrificing a land every upkeep.
no, but bro, you get him back.
Right, but then we're at the same mana.
Oh, that's okay.
Like I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying I like if there
Does
are two
Gitrog not let
cards
you play an extra land? I'm pretty sure you can play extra lands, dude.
Okay, so if you play extra lands, so we're just cycling a land every turn?
No, no, you get an extra land, right?
Well, but so we're essentially
You
cycling a land. We're just drawing an extra card every turn,
no,
effectively.
no.
Right. No, because we can play the land we sacrifice and then we can make a land drop.
You may play an additional land on each of your turns, right? So you sacrifice the land, you play the land from your hand, you play the land from your graveyard, you're up a land. You're ramping every turn.
Well, if you have the land to play every turn, the
You're
extra.
drawing an extra card every turn too.
Right, but any game where you also don't have both parts of that is going to be
It's
super.
gonna be rough. It's gonna be rough. I'm just saying that Timothy's not wrong. It does ramp. Uh, I refuse to read the next tweet, and so does Michael. Meddling Mage getting himself inducted into the Hall of Fame. Hashtag with the good. Hashtag MTGO Hall of Fame. Okay, so there's a lot of drama on Twitter about this today. Do I believe that Chris should be in the Hall of Fame? Yes. Do I believe that Chris's resume currently says he should be in the Fame? No. Do I believe that Chris's current resume is better than people who are already in the Hall of Fame? Yes, absolutely. What argument do you want to make? There's tons of
I
arguments. It's like
Yeah, I'd agree with the second two parts of that for sure. Like, I don't think his resume is good enough, but I think it's better than some of the worst ones.
yeah, I think I
I
think that he missed the Hall of Fame by one vote once when he probably was pretty close to getting in, and it's really sad. And dude, if this sounds so stupid, as
But
I've never
changing the
done this.
percentage, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they changed the percentage. He's probably not going to get it unless he like top eights another pro tour.
but that and I was gonna say all he has to do is top eight another pro tour and he's in.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all he has to
Yep.
do.
And as
Uh,
we know, that's really easy.
yeah,
That's
it's super easy. But like the guy's done it 3 times. Like I I mean, people were worried that Chapin wasn't going to get his fourth, and then he got it, and then got a fifth. Like
yeah.
sometimes, like honestly, you just like he's if he doesn't get it, like he's got to get back on the train and get the fourth one. Most people don't get in without four. It's just I think there's three, right? It's Randy Bueller, uh, Willie Adel, and Shouta Yusoka. I believe are the three without four, and I think that's it. So it's pretty hard to get in without four. Do I think that Chris has had a huge impact on Magic? Yeah, I do. There we go. We've covered
Yep.
a news topic on this podcast. There you guys go. Watching at CCMTG live stream on the living room TV. Hashtag would that be good? Ryan, it's always great when you're watching, man.
But did you see the replies to this tweet? You
I'm
might
not
think
gonna
this is yeah.
I'm not gonna read them. My friend won a PPTQ after working hard all weekend on a brew and then playing super tight. Okay, so
I mean, I wish I had won a
I have been
PPTQ with
asked
Sacred
by
Cat.
listeners if they should play this deck, and my answer is no. I literally don't know that I saw it win a game where it did not cast Fumigate. I
I didn't watch that
I
much.
I would not play this deck. I'm really glad that your friend won a PPTQ Mason.
I would
I
ask Mason about it. He
I
probably
would
could tell you.
yeah, I would ask Mason or Mason's friend who actually played the deck rather than us. Yeah. Yep. All right. That is it. And congratulations. What's your friend's name, Mason? Congratulations to Trey for winning that PPTQ. Everyone have a wonderful week. We'll see you guys all next Monday, back at our normal time,
Yeah.
unless somebody dies, which I hope doesn't happen.
I mean, it felt like an aggressive way to
Bye, everyone.